The silence in St. Matthew's Cathedral was deafening as Father Rodriguez looked around the packed sanctuary, his weathered hands gripping the ornate podium. The bride stood radiant in her ivory gown, the groom nervous but beaming beside her, and 300 guests sat in hushed anticipation of the ceremony. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we begin, Father Rodriguez announced, his voice echoing through the cathedral, I need to acknowledge someone very important, the generous benefactor who made this beautiful celebration possible. His eyes swept across the congregation. Where is the person who covered the expenses for today's ceremony? My sister Charlotte's face went ashen. Her new mother-in-law, Patricia Thornfield, shifted uncomfortably in the front pew. The groom, Marcus, looked confused as murmurs rippled through the crowd. But I wasn't there to answer, because 3 days earlier, Charlotte had looked me straight in the eye and said, Rebecca, I think it's better if you don't come to my wedding. You just complicate things. What she didn't know was that I had quietly paid for everything, the cathedral rental, the flowers, the reception venue, even her designer dress. $38,000 from my life savings, given out of love for the sister I'd practically raised. Now, as Father Rodriguez waited for an answer that would never come, my absence was about to reveal a truth that would change everything. The story of how I became the invisible backbone of Charlotte's life began 22 years ago, when I was just 14 and she was 6. Our parents, David and Susan Mitchell, were killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver on Highway 94, returning from their anniversary dinner at Romano's Italian restaurant. I still remember that October night, the red and blue lights flashing through our living room window, the polite but somber faces of the police officers, and Charlotte's small hand clutching mine as a social worker, explained that our world had just changed forever. Our grandmother, Evelyn Mitchell, became our legal guardian, but at 73, she was already struggling with early-stage dementia. Rebecca, honey, Grandma Evelyn had said to me just days after the funeral, her thin fingers trembling as she tried to button Charlotte's school uniform. I'm going to need your help with your sister. She's going to need someone to look after her. At 14, I thought I understood what that meant. I imagined helping with homework, maybe making breakfast on weekends. I had no idea I was about to become a parent to my own sister. Mickey Moore. The responsibility came gradually, then, all at once. Charlotte started having nightmares every night, waking up screaming for Mom and Dad. Grandma Evelyn would shuffle to our room in her slippers, confused and disoriented, sometimes forgetting who we were entirely. It fell to me to comfort Charlotte, to hold her until she stopped crying, to explain over and over again that our parents weren't coming back. When Charlotte wet the bed, something she hadn't done since she was 3, I was the one washing sheets at midnight. When she refused to eat anything but peanut butter sandwiches for 3 months straight, I was the one packing them in her lunchbox and explaining to concerned teachers that she was going through a phase. When she threw tantrums at the grocery store because she couldn't understand why we couldn't just call Mom to come pick us up, I was the one carrying her out while strangers stared and whispered. Grandma Evelyn tried her best, but her condition deteriorated rapidly. By the time I was 16, she was asking who Charlotte and I were most days. The social services visits became more frequent, the questions more pointed. I learned to schedule them for Grandma's good days, when she was lucid enough to remember our names and smile convincingly at the caseworkers. Your grandmother seems to be managing well, Mrs. Patterson from Child Protective Services would note, scribbling in her manila folder. What she didn't see was me doing all the cooking, cleaning, and caregiving while maintaining a 4.0 GPA and working part-time at Henderson's Hardware to help with expenses. The insurance money from our parents' death provided basic necessities, but extras, the things that made childhood special, required creativity and sacrifice. When Charlotte wanted to join the school's dance team at 8 years old, I picked up extra shifts at the hardware store to pay for her costume and shoes. When she decided she absolutely had to have a birthday party like normal kids, I spent my entire paycheck, from 2 weeks of work, to rent the community center and buy decorations. I never resented Charlotte for these sacrifices. If anything, I felt protective of her innocence, determined to shield her from the harsh realities of our situation. When she asked why I couldn't go to the junior prom because I couldn't afford a dress, I told her I wasn't interested in silly high school stuff. When she wondered why I didn't have friends over like other teenagers, I said I preferred quiet evenings at home. The truth was, I had constructed my entire adolescence around Charlotte's needs. My friends gradually drifted away as I turned down invitation after invitation. Dating was impossible when I was either working, studying, or taking care of Charlotte and Grandma Evelyn. College applications sat untouched on my desk because I couldn't imagine leaving Charlotte, even with a full scholarship to State University. Charlotte thrived under this protection. She made friends easily, excelled in school, and developed a sunny, confident personality that drew people to her. She was homecoming princess, captain of the debate team, and eventually valedictorian of her high school class. Everyone in our small town of Millbrook loved Charlotte Mitchell, the resilient, brilliant girl who had overcome tragedy with such grace. What they didn't see was the infrastructure that made her success possible. The countless nights I stayed up helping with projects I should have been too young to understand. The time I sold my prized possession, a necklace our mother had given me, to pay for Charlotte's SAT prep course. The way I worked 3 jobs during her senior year to ensure she could attend every school event, every dance, every milestone that normal kids took for granted. When Charlotte received her acceptance letter to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, she burst into our tiny kitchen with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Rebecca, I did it! I'm going to college!" I hugged her tightly, genuinely thrilled for her achievement while simultaneously calculating in my head how I would cover the remaining tuition costs. The partial scholarship covered about 60% of her expenses. The rest, roughly $18,000 per year, would require me to take out loans, work even more hours, and postpone my own dreams indefinitely. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered into her hair, and I meant it completely. Grandma Evelyn passed away during Charlotte's sophomore year at Northwestern, leaving us a modest inheritance and the family home in Millbrook. Charlotte was devastated, flying back for the funeral with red-rimmed eyes and a black dress I had overnighted to her dorm. At the reading of the will, we learned that Grandma had left the house to both of us, but Charlotte immediately insisted I should have it. "You've done everything for this family," she said, squeezing my hand in the lawyer's office. "The house should be yours. I'll probably end up in Chicago anyway after graduation." It was a generous gesture, and I was touched by her thoughtfulness. What she didn't realize was that I had already been planning to sell the house to help fund her final 2 years of college, and whatever graduate school dreams she might have. Charlotte's college years were a whirlwind of academic achievements, internships, and social connections that would shape her future. She called me regularly, bubbling with excitement about her classes, her professors, and, eventually, her boyfriends. I lived vicariously through her stories, working my way up from Henderson's Hardware to a bookkeeping position at Morrison & Associates, a small accounting firm in town. "You should come visit, Rebecca," Charlotte would say during our weekly phone calls. "I want you to see the campus, meet my friends. You'd love Chicago." I always had an excuse. Work was busy, I couldn't afford the trip, I didn't want to impose on her college experience. The truth was, I was afraid of feeling out of place in her sophisticated new world. While she was discussing literature and philosophy with future lawyers and doctors, I was balancing ledgers for local businesses and coming home to an empty house every night. During her junior year, Charlotte met Marcus Thornfield at a university mixer. Marcus was everything I had hoped she would find: intelligent, ambitious, from a stable family, and clearly devoted to her. When she brought him home for Christmas that year, I could see the way he looked at her, like she was the most remarkable person he'd ever encountered. "Your sister is incredible," he told me privately while Charlotte was upstairs changing for dinner. "She's brilliant, beautiful, and so driven. I've never met anyone like her." I smiled, feeling a familiar warmth of pride mixed with something else, a recognition that Charlotte was moving into a life where I would play an increasingly peripheral role. Marcus came from money, real money. His father owned a chain of boutique hotels, his mother served on charity boards, and their family home in Lake Forest was featured in Architectural Digest. Charlotte fit seamlessly into their world in a way that both thrilled and worried me. She started speaking differently, carrying herself with a new kind of confidence that came from belonging somewhere prestigious. She traded her thrift store finds for designer pieces, learned about wine and art, and began using phrases like "summer in the Hamptons," as if she'd been born into that lifestyle. "The Thornfields have invited me to spend spring break at their house in Martha's Vineyard," she told me excitedly during one of our calls. "Can you believe it? Me in Martha's Vineyard." I was genuinely happy for her, but I also felt the growing distance between us. Her stories became filled with people I'd never met, experiences I couldn't relate to, and references to a life that seemed galaxies away from our childhood in Millbrook. When Marcus proposed during their senior year, a romantic gesture involving the Northwestern campus bell tower and a ring that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, Charlotte called me before anyone else. "Rebecca, I'm engaged," she squealed through the phone. "Marcus proposed tonight, and it was absolutely perfect. The ring is gorgeous, and he got down on one knee right where we had our first date, and oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, sinking into my kitchen chair. "I'm so happy for you. Marcus is a wonderful man." And he was. Despite his privileged background, Marcus was kind, respectful, and genuinely loved Charlotte. He never made me feel inferior during his visits to Millbrook, always asking about my work and treating me like a beloved future sister-in-law, rather than the small-town guardian who had raised his fiancée. The wedding planning began immediately after graduation. Charlotte and Marcus moved to Chicago, where he started a position at his father's company, and she began working at a prestigious marketing firm. The engagement period was a year-long celebration of parties, showers, and planning sessions that required a level of sophistication and financial resources I couldn't provide. Patricia Thornfield, Marcus's mother, took charge of most arrangements with the efficiency of someone accustomed to organizing large-scale social events. She was polite to me but distant, treating me more like a family friend than Charlotte's guardian and only relative. "Rebecca should definitely be included in the bridal party," Charlotte announced during one of our early planning calls. "She's basically been my mother since we were kids." I was touched by her intention but also aware of the practical complications. The other bridesmaids were Charlotte's college friends and Marcus's sister, women who could afford designer dresses, destination bachelorette parties, and the kind of wedding festivities that came naturally to their social circle. "Actually," I said carefully, "I think it might be better if I help in other ways. Maybe I could handle some of the behind-the-scenes coordination?" Charlotte seemed relieved by my suggestion, though she insisted it was entirely my choice. I suspect she had already recognized the same social complications I had, but neither of us wanted to acknowledge them directly. As the wedding date approached, I found myself in an unfamiliar role, working behind the scenes to ensure Charlotte's happiness while remaining largely invisible in the process. I researched vendors, compared prices, and handled logistics that the Thornfields either overlooked or considered beneath their attention. When the florist they had chosen turned out to be double-booked for the wedding date, I spent an entire weekend calling every florist in the Chicago area until I found a replacement who could match their exact specifications. "You're a lifesaver, Rebecca," Charlotte said when I called to tell her I'd solved the flower crisis. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But I was starting to wonder if she actually knew what I was doing for her, or if my efforts had simply become invisible through years of habit. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first sign that something was shifting came during Charlotte's engagement party at the Thornfield estate in Lake Forest. I had driven up from Millbrook in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, wearing the nicest dress I owned, a navy blue number I'd bought for Grandma Evelyn's funeral 5 years earlier. As I pulled into the circular driveway behind a line of BMWs and Mercedes, I felt the familiar pang of not quite belonging. The Thornfield house was everything I'd imagined from Charlotte's descriptions. Sprawling Tudor-style architecture, manicured gardens, and windows that gleamed like jewels in the afternoon sun. A valet appeared at my car door, looking slightly confused by my vehicle, but maintaining professional politeness. "Welcome to the Thornfield residence," he said, handing me a small card with a number. "Your car will be safely parked." Inside, the party was already in full swing. Charlotte looked radiant in a cream-colored cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier as she gestured animatedly to a group of well-dressed guests. When she spotted me across the room, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Rebecca," she called out, weaving through the crowd to reach me. "You made it! You look beautiful!" She pulled me into a warm hug, and for a moment I felt the familiar comfort of our bond. But as she began introducing me to her new social circle, I noticed subtle shifts in her demeanor. "Everyone, this is my sister Rebecca," she announced to a group of young professionals holding champagne flutes. "She's the one who basically raised me after our parents died." The responses were polite but brief. "How wonderful," murmured a blonde woman in Chanel. "So tragic about your parents," added a man in an expensive suit before quickly changing the subject to something about their recent trip to Napa Valley. I found myself standing awkwardly at the edge of conversations, nursing a glass of wine and trying to contribute to discussions about art galleries I'd never heard of, restaurants that required months-long reservations, and vacation destinations that cost more than my annual income. Charlotte would periodically check on me, but she was clearly in her element, effortlessly navigating topics and social cues that felt foreign to me. "Rebecca works in accounting," Charlotte explained when someone asked about my career. The way she said it, not unkindly, but almost apologetically, made me feel like I needed to justify my existence. "Actually, I'm a senior bookkeeper at Morrison & Associates," I clarified. "We handle accounts for most of the businesses in Millbrook." "How nice," the woman replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes before turning to ask Charlotte about her job at the marketing firm. The most telling moment came when Patricia Thornfield approached me near the dessert table. She was an elegant woman in her late 50s, with perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of understated jewelry that screamed old money. "Rebecca, isn't it?" she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Patricia, Marcus's mother. Charlotte has told me so much about you." "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Thornfield," I replied. "Thank you for hosting such a beautiful party." "Of course," she smiled. "Charlotte is like a daughter to us already. Though I must say, it's fascinating how different you two are, considering you were raised together." There was something in her tone, not malicious exactly, but calculating, that made me uncomfortable. "We had different interests growing up," I said diplomatically. "Yes, I suppose Charlotte has always been destined for bigger things," Patricia continued. "Such ambition, such natural sophistication. Marcus's father and I knew immediately that she belonged in our world. Our world. The phrase hung in the air between us like a velvet rope, polite but exclusionary." As the party wound down, Charlotte walked me to my car, chattering excitedly about the wedding plans. "Patricia has the most amazing connections," she gushed. "She knows this wedding planner, who did the Morrison Sterling wedding last year. You know, the one that was featured in Town & Country? And the venues she's shown me are just incredible." "That sounds wonderful," I said, fumbling for my car keys. "I'm so happy everything is working out perfectly." Charlotte paused, studying my face. "You seem quiet tonight. Did you have fun?" I forced a smile. "Of course, everyone was very nice. Your future in-laws clearly adore you." "They do," she agreed with satisfaction. "It's such a relief to feel like I finally fit somewhere, you know? Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Driving back to Millbrook that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Charlotte's words carried an implicit message about where I belonged. And it wasn't in her glittering new world. The exclusions became more frequent and more pointed as the wedding planning progressed. The bridal shower was held at an exclusive country club in Winnetka, and while I was invited, I arrived to find myself seated at a table with the elderly aunts and distant cousins, far from the inner circle of bridesmaids and college friends who surrounded Charlotte. "Rebecca, you simply must try the salmon tartare," called out Jessica Thornfield, Marcus's sister and maid of honor. She was a polished young woman who ran an art gallery in Soho, and spoke with the casual authority of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. I dutifully tried the salmon tartare, though I would have preferred the simple chicken salad. The conversation at my table centered on grandchildren, prescription medications, and complaints about changing neighborhoods, topics that made me feel decades older than my 36 years. Meanwhile, Charlotte's table erupted in laughter over shared memories from Northwestern, inside jokes about mutual friends, and plans for the bachelorette weekend in Napa Valley. I watched my sister from across the room, noting how seamlessly she fit into this group of confident, successful women who'd never had to work 3 jobs or raise a child while still being one themselves. The gift opening portion of the shower was particularly illuminating. Charlotte unwrapped elegant serving pieces from Tiffany, La Perla lingerie sets, and a weekend getaway package to a luxury spa in Scottsdale. When she reached my gift, a hand-embroidered tablecloth I'd found at an antique store in Millbrook, the room fell momentarily quiet. "Oh, Rebecca," Charlotte said softly, holding up the delicate fabric. "This is vintage." "It reminded me of the tablecloth Grandma Evelyn used for special occasions," I explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I thought it might be nice for your first dinner parties." "It's very thoughtful," Patricia Thornfield interjected with the kind of polite smile reserved for awkward moments. "How sentimental!" The word sentimental hung in the air like a diplomatic way of saying inappropriate for our social class. Charlotte quickly moved on to the next gift, but I caught the meaningful glance she exchanged with Jessica, a look that said, "We'll deal with this later." The bachelorette weekend was where the pattern of exclusion became impossible to ignore. Initially, I had been invited, though the cost, nearly $2,000 for 3 days in Napa Valley, was prohibitive for my budget. I had been quietly trying to figure out how to afford it, perhaps by taking on additional freelance work, when Charlotte called with unexpected news. "Rebecca, I feel terrible about this," she began, her voice carrying a note of manufactured regret. "But Jessica and the girls have planned some activities for the bachelorette weekend that are, well, they're kind of specific to our college group. Inside jokes, shared memories, that sort of thing. Patricia thought it might be awkward for you to be the only non-Northwestern person there." "I see," I said carefully. "And you agreed with this assessment?" "It's not that I don't want you there," Charlotte rushed to explain. "It's just that this particular weekend is really about reconnecting with my college friends before I start this new chapter of my life. You understand, right? We can do something special together, just the two of us, another time." The just the two of us celebration never materialized. Charlotte returned from Napa Valley with glowing stories about wine tastings, spa treatments, and bonding experiences that had brought her closer to her bridal party. The photos she posted on social media showed a group of radiant women in matching silk robes, laughing over champagne, and looking like they belonged in a luxury lifestyle magazine. "You would have loved the spa," Charlotte told me during our next phone call. "The massages were incredible, and the wine country is just breathtaking. Jessica knows the owner of this exclusive winery, so we got a private tasting." I made appropriate sounds of interest, while feeling the growing chasm between Charlotte's experiences and my own. While she was having private wine tastings in Napa Valley, I was working overtime at Morrison & Associates to save money for her wedding gift. The venue selection process was perhaps the most telling example of how thoroughly I'd been relegated to the sidelines. Charlotte and Patricia had been touring potential locations for weeks, visiting exclusive estates and luxury hotels throughout the Chicago area. I heard about these expeditions secondhand through Charlotte's enthusiastic recaps of their findings. "We saw the most amazing place today," she would report. "It's this historic mansion in Lake Geneva, with gardens that go right down to the water. Patricia knows the event coordinator personally, so we might be able to get a discount." I noticed that these conversations always featured Patricia as the key decision-maker and connection provider. Charlotte spoke about her future mother-in-law with a reverence that she'd once reserved for our own mother's memory. "Patricia has such incredible taste," Charlotte would say. "She's taught me so much about entertaining, about creating the right atmosphere for important events. I'm so lucky to have her guidance." The final venue selection was made during a weekend when I was tied up with a major client audit at work. Charlotte called me Sunday evening, breathless with excitement. "Rebecca, we found it. The perfect venue. It's St. Matthew's Cathedral for the ceremony. Can you believe it? It's the same church where Marcus's grandparents were married, and the reception will be at the Fairmont Hotel ballroom." Patricia was able to pull some strings with the event coordinator. I felt a stab of disappointment that I hadn't been included in this momentous decision, but I pushed the feeling aside. "That sounds absolutely perfect, Charlotte. I'm so happy for you." "The only thing is," Charlotte continued, and I could hear the slight hesitation in her voice, "it's going to be quite expensive, more than we initially budgeted for. But Patricia says that for a wedding of this caliber, You really can't compromise on the venue. How expensive? I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be far beyond what Charlotte and Marcus could reasonably afford on their entry-level salaries. Well, the cathedral alone is $15,000 for the day, and the reception venue is another $23,000, plus catering, flowers, music, she trailed off. It adds up quickly. That's nearly $40,000 just for the venues, I said quietly. I know it sounds like a lot, Charlotte said defensively, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and the Thornfields have offered to help with some of the expenses. They want this wedding to reflect Marcus's position in the family business. What she didn't say, but what I understood implicitly, was that my modest financial contribution wouldn't be significant enough to influence any decisions. The Thornfields were setting the standard for what this wedding should be, and I simply couldn't compete. Of course, I replied. This is your special day. It should be exactly what you want. But even as I said the words, I was already calculating in my head. $38,000 for the venues alone. If I liquidated my savings account, sold some of Grandma Evelyn's jewelry, and took out a small loan against the house, I could cover it. Not easily, and not without significant financial strain, but I could do it. Ifrik snikker. The decision formed in my mind before I fully realized I was making it. Charlotte deserved her perfect day, her fairy tale wedding, her seamless entry into the Thornfield family's sophisticated world. If I couldn't be included in the planning, if I couldn't fit into her new social circle, if I was gradually being written out of her story, then at least I could give her this gift. The next morning, I called the cathedral and the hotel, posing as a representative of the Mitchell family. I spoke with coordinators, reviewed contracts, and arranged payment schedules. By the end of the week, I had quietly and anonymously secured both venues for Charlotte's wedding, using every dollar I had saved over the past decade. Charlotte called me that Friday, ecstatic. Rebecca, the most amazing thing happened. The venues called and said that all the fees had been taken care of by an anonymous benefactor. Can you believe it? Patricia thinks it might be one of Marcus's father's business associates, someone who wants to remain discreet. Isn't that incredible? Incredible, I agreed, my voice steady despite the emotions churning in my chest. This means we can spend more on other things. The flowers, the band, maybe even upgrade the catering menu. I feel like everything is just falling into place perfectly. That night, I sat in my empty house in Millbrook, surrounded by the familiar furniture and photographs that told the story of our childhood together. I looked at pictures of Charlotte and me at various ages, her first day of school, Christmas mornings, high school graduation, and tried to reconcile those images with the sophisticated woman who was now planning her elaborate wedding with her future in-laws while I watched from an ever-increasing distance. I had given her my financial future, but I was beginning to understand that what I really wanted, to feel valued, included, essential in her life, couldn't be purchased at any price. The dress shopping expedition was meant to be a bonding experience between sisters. At least, that's what I naively believed when Charlotte called me 3 weeks before the wedding, her voice unusually tentative. Rebecca, I know this is last minute, but I was wondering, would you like to come with me to pick up my wedding dress? I'm getting the final fitting at Bella Couture in Chicago, and I thought it might be nice to have you there. My heart swelled with unexpected warmth. After months of feeling increasingly sidelined, this invitation felt like an olive branch, a recognition that despite everything, I was still her sister, still important enough to witness this milestone moment. I'd love to, I said immediately. What time should I meet you? Actually, Patricia and Jessica are coming too, Charlotte added quickly. We're making a whole day of it. Lunch at the Four Seasons, then the fitting, then maybe some shopping. It'll be fun. I should have recognized the warning signs. The fact that Patricia and Jessica were included suggested this wasn't really about sister bonding. But I was so grateful for any inclusion that I ignored my instincts. The drive to Chicago that Saturday morning was filled with anticipation. I had even bought a new outfit for the occasion, a simple but elegant black dress from Nordstrom that had cost more than I usually spent on clothes in 3 months. I wanted to look like I belonged in the upscale boutiques we'd be visiting. Bella Couture was everything I'd imagined from Charlotte's descriptions. a temple to bridal luxury tucked into a converted brownstone on Michigan Avenue. The front window displayed a single gown that probably cost more than my car, and the interior was all cream silk walls, crystal chandeliers, and the hushed reverence of serious money. Charlotte was already there when I arrived, standing on a raised platform in front of three-way mirrors, while a team of seamstresses made microscopic adjustments to her dress. The gown was breathtaking, a masterpiece of French lace and silk that transformed her into something ethereal and otherworldly. "Rebecca," she called out when she saw me, her face lighting up with genuine joy. "What do you think?" "You look absolutely stunning," I said, and I meant it. In that moment, seeing her radiant happiness, all the recent tensions faded away. She was still my little sister, still the girl I'd raised and protected, and loved unconditionally. Patricia and Jessica were seated in plush armchairs, sipping champagne and offering commentary on the alterations. They greeted me politely, but with the subtle distance I'd come to expect. I took a seat slightly apart from them, content to watch Charlotte's transformation. "The hemline is perfect now," Patricia declared, examining the dress with the critical eye of someone accustomed to perfection. "And the bustle will be essential for the reception. Charlotte, you'll need to practice walking in it." "I can help her practice," I offered, wanting to contribute something useful to the conversation. "Oh, that's sweet," Jessica said with a condescending smile, "but we've already arranged for a professional bridal consultant to do a rehearsal session. It's quite technical, all the different layers and attachments." Of course they had. I nodded and retreated back into observation mode, watching the seamstresses work their magic while trying to ignore the growing sense that I was merely a spectator in my own sister's life. The fitting took nearly 2 hours, with every detail scrutinized and adjusted. When it was finally complete, Charlotte changed back into her street clothes, and we headed to lunch at the Four Seasons. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place where Patricia felt most comfortable. Understated elegance, impeccable service, and prices that required no glancing at the menu. "This is such a treat," Charlotte said as we settled into our table with a view of the lake. "I can't believe in 3 weeks I'll be Mrs. Marcus Thornfield." "It has a lovely ring to it," Patricia agreed, raising her champagne flute. "To Charlotte, who's going to be a wonderful addition to our family." I raised my water glass. I declined the champagne, knowing I needed to drive home and unable to afford the markup on alcohol, and smiled at the toast. But Jessica's next words made my blood freeze. "Speaking of family," Jessica began, glancing meaningfully at Patricia, "we should probably discuss the final arrangements for the wedding day. Patricia, have you finalized the family seating chart?" Patricia dabbed her lips with her napkin before responding. "Yes, I believe everything is in order. The Thornfield family will occupy the first 3 rows on the right side, and Charlotte's family will be on the left." "Charlotte's family?" I asked, confused. "You mean me?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Charlotte avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in her salmon salad. Patricia cleared her throat delicately. "Well, that's actually something we've been discussing," Patricia said with the tone of someone delivering unfortunate but necessary news. "The thing is, Rebecca, this wedding is quite high profile. Many of Marcus's father's business associates will be attending, along with several prominent families from the North Shore social circle." I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. "What does that have to do with me?" Jessica leaned forward, her voice taking on the patient tone reserved for explaining complicated concepts to children. "It's just that the optics are important. Charlotte will be representing the Thornfield family name now, and first impressions matter tremendously in our social circles." "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to understand all too well. Charlotte finally looked up, her eyes pleading. "Rebecca, you know I love you. You know how grateful I am for everything you've done for me. But this wedding, it's not just about Marcus and me. It's about our future, our place in his family's world." "What are you saying?" I asked, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. Patricia took over, her words delivered with surgical precision. "What we're saying is that it might be better if you attended the wedding as a regular guest. Not as family per se, but as a dear friend. Someone who's been important to Charlotte's past but isn't necessarily part of her future." The words hit me like a physical blow. After 22 years of being Charlotte's everything, her parent, her protector, her biggest supporter, I was being relegated to the status of a distant acquaintance. "You want me to sit with strangers," I said slowly, "while my sister gets married." "Not strangers," Jessica corrected quickly. "Just not in the family section. There will be lovely people at your table, I'm sure. Patricia has been very thoughtful about the seating arrangements." I turned to Charlotte, searching her face for any sign of protest, any indication that she disagreed with this plan. Instead, I saw guilt, discomfort, and, worst of all, resignation. "You're okay with this?" I asked her directly. Charlotte's hands twisted in her lap. "I just want everything to be perfect, Rebecca. This is my one chance to make the right impression, to show that I belong in Marcus's world. Can't you understand that?" "What I understand," I said, my voice growing stronger, "is that you're ashamed of me. Ashamed of where we came from. Ashamed of the fact that I raised you in a small town instead of a mansion. Ashamed that I work as a bookkeeper instead of running an art gallery." "That's not fair," Charlotte protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "When did I become an embarrassment to you, Charlotte? When did the person who sacrificed everything for your happiness become someone you need to hide?" Patricia's voice cut through the tension like ice. "Rebecca, I think you're being dramatic. We're not asking you to stay away from the wedding. We're simply suggesting that you might be more comfortable." "Don't." I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Don't you dare tell me what would make me comfortable. You don't know me, you don't know what I've done for this family, and you certainly don't get to decide my place in my sister's life." I grabbed my purse and looked directly at Charlotte. "I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you want me at your wedding, or not?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't meet my gaze. "Of course I want you there. You're my sister." "That's not what I asked," I pressed. "I asked if you want me there, not if you feel obligated to invite me, not if you think it's the right thing to do." "Do you actually want me at your wedding?" The silence stretched between us, broken only by the gentle clink of silverware and murmured conversations from other tables. Charlotte's tears spilled over, but she still couldn't look at me. "I want you there," she finally whispered, "but I also want to fit in. I want to belong somewhere, Rebecca. I've never belonged anywhere before." "You belonged with me," I said quietly. "We belonged together. We were family." "I know," she sobbed, "but this feels different. This feels like coming home to a place I was always meant to be." I stared at her for a long moment. This woman who had once been the center of my universe, the reason for every decision I'd made since I was 14 years old. Somewhere along the way, I had lost her to a world that valued appearances over authenticity, status over loyalty, and social climbing over the bonds that had held us together through our darkest times. "I see," I said finally. "Then I guess you have your answer." I turned to leave, but Charlotte's voice stopped me. "Rebecca, wait. Please don't go. We can work this out. Maybe there's a compromise." "There is no compromise," I said without turning around. "Either I'm your family or I'm not. Either I belong at your wedding or I don't. And you've just made it very clear where you stand." I walked out of the Four Seasons with as much dignity as I could muster, leaving Charlotte crying at the table with her future family. The valet brought my modest Honda to the front entrance, and I drove home to Millbrook in a daze, my mind reeling from the conversation. That evening I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at the wedding invitation that had arrived weeks earlier. "The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Charlotte Rose Mitchell to Marcus James Thornfield," it read in elegant script. The irony wasn't lost on me that my presence was being requested by the very people who had just made it clear it wasn't welcome. My phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry about today. Can we please talk? I love you." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I love you too, but love isn't enough anymore, is it?" She didn't respond. The next morning, I called the Cathedral and the hotel, using the confirmation numbers I'd memorized from weeks of secret coordination. It took 3 separate phone calls and a significant amount of persistence, but I finally reached the right people. "This is Rebecca Mitchell," I said to the Cathedral coordinator. "I need to discuss the billing for the Mitchell-Thornfield wedding." "Oh yes, Miss Mitchell," the coordinator replied cheerfully. "Everything is all set. The anonymous benefactor covered all the fees, so you're all taken care of. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. I need to make a change. I am the anonymous benefactor, and I'm canceling my payment authorization. There was a pause. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I paid for the cathedral rental, I said clearly. $38,000 total, between the cathedral and the hotel reception. I'm withdrawing my sponsorship effective immediately. The coordinator's voice became strained. Miss Mitchell, I'm afraid that's not possible. The wedding is in 3 weeks. The contracts are signed, the preparations are underway. Then I suggest you contact the Mitchell and Thornfield families immediately, I interrupted. Because as of right now, they need to find alternative funding for their venues. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the ghosts of Charlotte's childhood, and waited for the phone to ring. It didn't take long. The phone calls started within hours of my cancellation. First came the cathedral coordinator, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Miss Mitchell, I've been trying to reach the Thornfield family, but no one is answering. The wedding is scheduled for Saturday, and we need immediate resolution of the payment issue. If alternative arrangements aren't made by tomorrow, we'll have to release the booking. I listened to her voicemail with a strange sense of detachment. For 22 years, I had been the person who solved problems, who made everything work seamlessly behind the scenes. Now, for the first time, I was the one creating the problem. The hotel called next, then the florist who had been coordinating with the venues, then the wedding planner Patricia had hired to manage the final details. Each message grew more frantic than the last, painting a picture of a carefully orchestrated event suddenly teetering on the edge of disaster. But it was Marcus who called me directly, his voice strained with confusion and barely controlled panic. Rebecca, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's been some kind of mix-up with the wedding venues. The coordinators are saying something about canceled payments, and they mentioned your name. Do you know anything about this? I had always liked Marcus. Despite his privileged background, he had treated me with consistent kindness and respect. Even now, in his moment of crisis, his tone was more bewildered than accusatory. It's not a mix-up, Marcus, I said gently. I was the one who paid for the cathedral and the hotel, and I've withdrawn my financial support. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if the call had been dropped. You paid for the venues? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. $38,000, I confirmed. I wanted Charlotte to have her perfect wedding, even if I wasn't welcome as part of her family. Rebecca, I don't understand. We were told it was an anonymous business associate of my father's. Patricia said. Patricia was wrong, I interrupted. She assumed it was someone from your world, because she couldn't imagine that someone from mine would have the resources, or the inclination to make such a gesture. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Charlotte doesn't know, does she? She has no idea you did this. None of you did, I said. I didn't do it for recognition or gratitude. I did it because I loved my sister and wanted her to be happy. But I've learned that love without respect is just enabling, and I'm done being taken for granted. Rebecca, please, Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. The wedding is in 5 days. There has to be a way to fix this. What would it take for you to reconsider? I had been dreading this question, knowing it would come. Nothing, Marcus. This isn't about money or negotiation. This is about dignity and self-respect. Your family has made it clear that I don't belong in Charlotte's new life, and I'm finally accepting that reality. But Charlotte loves you, he protested. She's talked about you constantly since we've been together. She's told me stories about how you raised her, how you sacrificed everything for her education and happiness. She adores you. She has a funny way of showing it, I said, my voice harder than I intended. When given the choice between standing up for me and fitting in with your family, she chose your family. That tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in her priorities. After Marcus hung up, I turned off my phone and sat in my garden, watching the sun set over the small town that had been my entire world for 36 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Charlotte had been desperate to escape Millbrook and join the sophisticated circles of Chicago's elite, I had found peace and purpose in this simple place. The next morning brought Charlotte to my door, her face streaked with tears, and her usual polished appearance replaced by the raw vulnerability of someone whose world was crumbling. Rebecca, please, she said before I could even say hello. We need to talk. Marcus told me what you did, and I can't believe you paid for everything. Why didn't you tell me? I stepped aside to let her in, noting how different she looked in my modest living room compared to the grand settings where I'd seen her recently. Here, surrounded by the furniture and photographs of our shared childhood, she looked more like the little girl I'd raised than the sophisticated woman she'd become. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd feel obligated to include me out of guilt rather than genuine desire, I said, settling into the armchair across from her. I wanted to give you the gift freely, without strings attached. But $38,000, Rebecca? That's everything you've saved, isn't it? I nodded, surprised by the accuracy of her guess. Most of it, yes. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. How could you do that? How could you risk your entire financial future for my wedding? Because I'm an idiot, I said with a bitter laugh. Because I've spent so many years putting your needs first that I forgot I was allowed to have needs too. Because I thought if I could just give you one more perfect thing, you'd remember that I mattered. Charlotte buried her face in her hands. Of course you matter. You're the most important person in my life. Am I? I challenged. Because yesterday at lunch, when your future family was discussing how to hide me away like an embarrassing secret, you didn't say a word in my defense. You sat there and let them plan my humiliation. I was scared, she whispered. I was scared that if I fought them, they'd reject me. And I've wanted to belong somewhere for so long, Rebecca. I've wanted to feel like I had a real family. You did have a real family, I said, my voice breaking. You had me. We were family. But apparently, I wasn't the right kind of family for your new life. Charlotte looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to cancel the wedding? Call off the engagement? Because I will, Rebecca. If that's what it takes to fix this, I'll do it. The offer surprised me. For a moment I saw a flash of the old Charlotte, the one who had always put our relationship first. But I also heard the underlying resentment in her voice, the implication that I was being unreasonable and demanding. I don't want you to cancel your wedding, I said quietly. I want you to want me there. I want you to be proud of where you came from instead of ashamed of it. I want you to stand up for the person who raised you instead of hiding her away like a dirty secret. I'm not ashamed of you, Charlotte protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then prove it, I said. Go back to Patricia and Jessica and tell them that I'm your family. Tell them that I raised you, that I sacrificed my own dreams for yours, and that I deserve to be honored as such at your wedding. Tell them that if they can't accept me as part of your family, then maybe you're not the right fit for theirs. Charlotte stared at me, her face pale. You know I can't do that. They'll think I'm ungrateful, that I don't appreciate everything they've done for me. What have they done for you, Charlotte? I asked. Really? They've welcomed you into their social circle, introduced you to their friends, taught you about wine and art and the right way to set a table. But have they ever sat up with you all night when you were sick? Have they ever worked 3 jobs to pay for your education? Have they ever sold their own possessions to buy you something you wanted? That's different, she said weakly. Is it? Because, from where I sit, it looks like they've given you access to a lifestyle, while I gave you life itself. And yet you're willing to throw me away for them. Charlotte stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. It's not that simple, Rebecca. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. These people have expectations, standards. They judge everything. How you dress, how you speak, where you come from. If I don't meet those standards, I'll lose everything. You mean you'll lose Marcus? I mean I'll lose my chance at the life I've always wanted, she said, her voice rising. The life I've dreamed of since I was a little girl. The beautiful house, the social connections, the sense of belonging somewhere important. I can't give that up. Even if it means giving up the person who made that life possible. She turned to face me, her expression hardening. That's not fair. I'm not giving you up. I'm just asking you to understand that things are different now. I'm different now. Yes, you are, I agreed sadly. The Charlotte I raised would never have treated anyone the way you're treating me. She had compassion, loyalty, and integrity. She understood that real class isn't about money or social status. It's about how you treat people, especially those who've sacrificed for you. I do have compassion, Charlotte said defensively. I'm grateful for everything you've done. But I can't live my entire life trying to repay you for choices you made when we were kids." The words hit me like a slap. Choices I made? Charlotte. I was 14 years old when our parents died. I didn't choose to raise you. I just did it because you were my sister and I loved you. I didn't choose to give up my adolescence, my college plans, my own dreams. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And I appreciate that, she said, but her tone was increasingly cold. But I can't be held hostage by your sacrifices for the rest of my life. I have to live my own life now. Held hostage? I repeated, incredulous. Is that what you think this is about? You think I'm trying to control you by reminding you of what we've been through together? Aren't you? She challenged. You cancel my wedding venues 3 days before the ceremony, and then you sit here listing everything you've ever done for me. It sounds like emotional blackmail to me. I stared at her, this woman who had once been my entire world, and realized that I was looking at a stranger. Somewhere along the way, Charlotte had learned to rewrite our history, to recast my love and sacrifice as manipulation and control. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Rebecca, please, let's work this out. I'll find a way to pay for the venues myself. I'll take out a loan, ask Marcus's parents for help. We can fix this. You're missing the point, I said, walking to the front door. This was never about the money. It was about respect, about being valued as your family. And you've made it very clear that I'm not. Charlotte followed me to the door, her composure finally cracking completely. Fine, she said, her voice shaking with anger and tears. If that's how you want it, then fine. I'll have my wedding without you. I'll find a way to pay for everything myself, and I'll have the life I want. And maybe it's better this way. Maybe we both need to move on. Maybe we do, I agreed, opening the door. She walked out without looking back, and I watched her drive away in the BMW that Marcus had given her for her birthday. As her taillights disappeared around the corner, I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, but the last thread of hope that we could salvage our relationship. That evening, I received a call from Patricia Thornfield. Her voice was crisp and businesslike, with none of the polite pretense she'd maintained during our previous interactions. Rebecca, I think we need to have a frank conversation. Charlotte has told me about your little tantrum and your decision to sabotage her wedding. I'm calling to see if we can reach a reasonable resolution. There's nothing to resolve, I said. I've made my position clear. Your position is childish and vindictive, Patricia snapped, her mask of civility finally dropping. You're punishing a young woman for wanting to better herself, for wanting to escape the limitations of her background. It's petty and cruel. I'm not punishing her for wanting to better herself, I replied. I'm withdrawing my support because she's decided that bettering herself requires abandoning the person who made her success possible. You act as if you're the only one who's ever made a sacrifice, Patricia said dismissively. Charlotte has worked hard to get where she is. She's earned her place in our family and our social circle. She shouldn't have to apologize for that or lower her standards to accommodate your hurt feelings. My hurt feelings? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Patricia, I don't think you understand what I've given up for Charlotte. I've spent 22 years putting her needs first. And now that she's successful and settled, she's ready to discard me like an old piece of furniture that doesn't match her new decor. Drama, Patricia said dismissively. Pure drama. Charlotte isn't discarding you, she's simply establishing appropriate boundaries for her new life. If you can't accept that, then perhaps you're not the mature, loving sister you pretend to be. I hung up on her, my hands shaking with rage. The phone rang again immediately, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the life I'd built in Millbrook, and realized that for the first time in 22 years, I was truly alone. But strangely, instead of feeling devastated, I felt something else. Relief. The burden of being responsible for Charlotte's happiness had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I was free to discover who Rebecca Mitchell was when she wasn't defined by her role as Charlotte's protector and provider. The wedding was in 4 days, and I wouldn't be there. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I was at peace with that decision. Saturday morning dawned gray and overcast, matching my mood as I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and the local newspaper. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m., and I found myself wondering if Charlotte had managed to secure alternative venues, or if she was scrambling to find a solution even now. My phone had been silent since Patricia's call 2 days earlier. Part of me had expected, maybe even hoped, that Charlotte would reach out one more time, that she would choose our relationship over her social aspirations. But the silence spoke volumes about her priorities. At 10 a.m., my neighbor Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door, her face flushed with excitement and gossip. "Rebecca, dear, I just heard the most interesting news from my cousin who works at the Fairmont Hotel," she said, practically vibrating, with the thrill of being the first to share scandalous information. "Apparently there's been some kind of crisis with the Thornfield wedding. The hotel was expecting payment for the reception venue, and when they called this morning, they were told the booking was cancelled." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart began to race. Oh my. The strangest part is that they're saying the person who originally paid for it, some anonymous benefactor, withdrew their support. Can you imagine? 3 hours before the wedding. Mrs. Henderson's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "I don't suppose you know anything about this?" "I'm afraid not," I said, which was technically true. I didn't know about the current crisis, only the one I'd created. After Mrs. Henderson left, I found myself unable to concentrate on anything. I tried reading, cleaning, even starting a new painting, but my mind kept drifting to Charlotte. Despite everything that had happened between us, I couldn't shake the image of her in that beautiful dress, surrounded by guests, with nowhere to celebrate her marriage. At 11:30, Marcus called. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I'm desperate," he said, his voice tight with stress. "We managed to find a backup venue for the ceremony, the community center at Oak Park Presbyterian, but the reception is still a disaster. The hotel released our booking to another event when we couldn't confirm payment this morning." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. She's falling apart," Marcus continued. "She's been crying all morning, and Patricia is furious, and the guests are all calling to ask what's happening. This is supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, and instead it's turning into a nightmare." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. Whatever Charlotte had done, whatever harsh words we'd exchanged, she was still my sister. The thought of her wedding day being ruined gave me no satisfaction. "What do you want me to do, Marcus?" I asked. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," he said. "If Charlotte apologized, really apologized, and acknowledged what you've done for her, would you consider helping us? Not for Patricia, not for the Thornfield family, but for Charlotte." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of responsibility, the ingrained habit of solving Charlotte's problems. "Marcus, I appreciate that you're trying to fix this, but she fired the wedding planner," he interrupted. "This morning, when Patricia started blaming everyone else for the crisis, Charlotte told her that she was tired of other people making decisions about her life. She fired the planner, told Jessica she could keep her opinions to herself, and announced that she was going to handle everything herself from now on. This was unexpected." "She stood up to Patricia?" "She stood up to everyone," Marcus said. "She told her parents that she was grateful for their support, but that she was done pretending to be someone she wasn't. She said she'd rather have a simple wedding that honored her real family than an elaborate one that required her to hide her past." My heart skipped a beat. "Her real family? She specifically mentioned you, Rebecca. She said that you were the only real family she'd ever had, and that she'd been an idiot to let anyone convince her otherwise." I sat down heavily, my mind reeling. "She said that?" "She said a lot more than that," Marcus replied. "She told Patricia that if she couldn't accept you as part of the family, then maybe Charlotte didn't belong in ours. She said she'd rather call off the wedding than get married without your blessing." Tears sprang to my eyes unexpectedly. "She said that? She's been trying to call you all morning, but your phone goes straight to voicemail. Rebecca, I've never seen her like this. She's completely broken. She keeps saying she's lost the most important person in her life because she was too proud and too stupid to see what really mattered." I looked at my phone and realized I'd turned it off after Patricia's call. When I powered it back on, I saw 17 missed calls from Charlotte and dozens of text messages, each one more desperate than the last. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I was wrong about everything. Please answer your phone. I need to talk to you. I love you more than anything in this world, and I'm sorry I forgot that." I don't care about the venues or the reception, I just want my sister back. The last message, sent just 20 minutes earlier, made my breath catch. I'm calling off the wedding. I can't marry Marcus knowing I've lost you. You're my family and I should have fought for you from the beginning. I was still staring at my phone when it rang in my hands. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I hesitated. Then I answered. Rebecca? Charlotte's voice was raw from crying. Please don't hang up. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you to listen to me. I'm listening, I said quietly. I'm so sorry, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'm sorry for everything, for letting them exclude you, for being ashamed of where I came from, for forgetting that you're the reason I had any opportunities at all. I'm sorry for hurting you, and I'm sorry for being so selfish and blind. Charlotte, I'm canceling the wedding, she continued. I can't go through with it knowing what I've done to you. Marcus deserves better than someone who would betray her own family for social acceptance. And you deserve better than a sister who would treat you like an embarrassment. You don't have to cancel your wedding, I said, though my voice was thick with tears. Yes, I do, she said firmly. Because I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me. This isn't about the venues or the money. It's about respect and love and loyalty. And I failed you on all counts. For a long moment we both cried into our phones, 22 years of love and pain and misunderstanding flowing between us. Where are you now? I asked finally. I'm at the community center, she said. In the bridal suite, still in my wedding dress. The guests are all here, Marcus is waiting at the altar, and I'm supposed to walk down the aisle in 30 minutes. But I can't do it, Rebecca. I can't start my marriage by pretending that the most important person in my life doesn't matter. I looked at the clock on my kitchen wall. It was 1:30 p.m. The wedding was supposed to start in 30 minutes, and Charlotte was ready to call it off rather than go through with it without my blessing. Charlotte, listen to me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I don't want you to cancel your wedding. I want you to marry Marcus because you love him, not because you need to prove something to me. But I've ruined everything, she sobbed. I've hurt you, I've disappointed myself, and I've shown everyone what kind of person I really am. You've shown everyone that you're human, I corrected. You made mistakes, but you're trying to fix them. That's what matters. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I don't know how to make it right. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 22 years of love and sacrifice and complicated family dynamics. In that moment, I had a choice to make. I could let Charlotte's wedding day be ruined as punishment for her mistakes. Or I could be the person I'd always been, the one who solved problems, who put love first, who chose family over pride. Tell me about the reception situation, I said. There is no reception, Charlotte said miserably. The hotel released our booking, and everything else is booked solid. Patricia called every venue in the city, but Saturday afternoon bookings are impossible to find on such short notice. What about the church fellowship hall, I asked. The one attached to Oak Park Presbyterian? It's not very elegant, Charlotte said hesitantly. Just a basic hall with folding tables and industrial lighting. Nothing like what we had planned. But it's available. Yes, but Rebecca, it's so different from what we originally wanted. No crystal chandeliers, no lakefront views, no gourmet catering. Just a simple room with basic facilities. Sometimes simple is better, I said. Sometimes it's more honest. There was a pause. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you really mean what you said about respecting me and valuing our relationship, then maybe it's time to have the wedding that reflects who you really are, not who you think you should be. I don't understand. Charlotte, do you remember Grandma Evelyn's 75th birthday party? The one we threw in the church fellowship hall in Millbrook? Of course, she said softly. You made all the decorations yourself, and Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought her famous apple pie. Everyone said it was the most beautiful party they'd ever seen. It was beautiful because it was real, I said. Because it was about celebrating someone we loved, not about impressing anyone or meeting some standard of elegance. Maybe that's what your wedding should be. A celebration of love, not a performance of status. But the guests, Charlotte protested. All of Marcus's family's friends, the business associates, the people who are expecting a certain level of, let them be surprised, I interrupted. Let them see that Charlotte Mitchell is someone who values substance over style, who knows the difference between class and cash, who isn't afraid to be authentic. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. Would you help me? If I do this, if I have the wedding in the church fellowship hall, would you help me make it beautiful? I'm already on my way, I said, grabbing my car keys. I drove to Oak Park Presbyterian with my heart pounding and my mind racing through possibilities. In the 30 minutes it took to reach the church, I made a dozen phone calls, pulling together resources and favors I'd been saving for years. Helen, it's Rebecca Mitchell from Millbrook, I said to the owner of Peterson's floral shop. I need an emergency favor. Can you put together simple but elegant centerpieces for about 20 tables? I know it's last minute, but… Rebecca, honey, for you? After all the business you've sent my way over the years, I'll raid my cooler and make it work. Where do you need them delivered? Sarah, this is Rebecca. I need your catering truck at Oak Park Presbyterian in 2 hours. Nothing fancy. Just your famous pulled pork, coleslaw, and cornbread. Can you make it happen? Girl, you sound like you're in crisis mode. Of course I can make it happen. How many people? Jim, I need the sound system from your DJ company. Yes, I know it's Saturday afternoon. Yes, I'll pay overtime. This is an emergency. By the time I pulled into the church parking lot, I had assembled a team of small-town vendors who knew me, trusted me, and were willing to drop everything to help. It wasn't the polished elegance of Chicago's finest establishments, but it was something better. It was heart. The Oak Park Presbyterian Fellowship Hall was exactly as Charlotte had described. Basic, functional, and utterly lacking in glamour. Industrial lighting, beige walls, and folding tables that had seen better days. But as I stood in the doorway, I didn't see limitations. I saw possibilities. Charlotte appeared beside me, still in her wedding dress, but with her hair slightly mussed and her makeup smudged from tears. She looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. Vulnerable and real, in a way that her polished perfection had never achieved. Rebecca, she breathed, throwing her arms around me. I can't believe you came. I can't believe you're here. I hugged her back, feeling the familiar weight of her in my arms, the scent of her perfume mixing with the faint smell of old coffee and church potluck dinners. I'm here, I said simply. We're gonna make this beautiful. But how? She asked, gesturing at the bare walls and folding chairs. There's no time, no decorations, no, there's love, I interrupted. And sometimes, that's enough. Marcus appeared, looking harried but relieved. Rebecca, thank God. I was starting to think this whole day was cursed. The guests are all here. Father Rodriguez is ready. But this, he gestured helplessly at the fellowship hall, this isn't exactly what we envisioned. It's perfect, I said, surprising them both. Marcus, do you love Charlotte? Of course I do, more than anything. And Charlotte, do you love Marcus? Yes, she said without hesitation. Then that's all that matters. Everything else is just decoration. I spent the next hour orchestrating what could only be described as a miracle of community cooperation. Helen Peterson arrived with armloads of mason jars filled with wildflowers and baby's breath. Sarah Martinez wheeled in her catering setup, filling the hall with the mouth-watering aroma of home-cooked food. Jim Bradley set up speakers and a simple sound system, testing levels with acoustic guitar music that was infinitely more soulful than the string quartet originally planned. But the real transformation came from the guests themselves. As word spread about the venue change and the circumstances behind it, something remarkable happened. Instead of the whispered complaints and social media mockery I'd expected, people began rolling up their sleeves to help. Mrs. Dorothy Thornfield, Marcus's elderly grandmother, directed a group of women in draping white sheets over the folding tables and securing them with ribbon. I've been to enough church suppers to know how to make a fellowship hall look festive, she announced with surprising authority. Several of Charlotte's Northwestern friends, still in their designer cocktail dresses, were stringing lights around the windows and adjusting flower arrangements. This is actually kind of fun, one of them said, stepping back to admire her work. It's like those Pinterest boards about rustic chic weddings. Even some of Marcus's business associates had loosened their ties and were helping move tables and chairs. The atmosphere was completely different from what I'd observed at the engagement party. Instead of stiff formality, there was genuine warmth and camaraderie. The most surprising transformation was in Patricia Thornfield. I found her in the church kitchen, sleeves rolled up, helping to arrange plates and utensils for the buffet service. "Mrs. Thornfield," I said carefully, unsure of how to approach her after our harsh phone conversation. She looked up, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, her makeup showing signs of stress. For a moment, we stared at each other across the kitchen island. "Rebecca," she said finally, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge, "I owe you an apology. I hadn't expected this." "You do?" "Charlotte told me what you did. How you paid for the original venues, how you've supported her throughout her life. She also told me about our conversation at the Four Seasons and how we made you feel unwelcome." Patricia's hands twisted the dish towel she was holding. I was wrong. I was so focused on what I thought was best for Marcus and Charlotte that I forgot about basic human decency. "Thank you for saying that," I said, meaning it. "I've been watching you for the past hour," she continued, "orchestrating this whole rescue operation, bringing in your friends and vendors, making magic happen out of nothing. And I realized something. You have more real class than most of the people in my social circle. Class isn't about money or connections. It's about character." Before I could respond, she added, "Charlotte is lucky to have you as a sister. And if Marcus marries her, then our family is lucky to have you too." The ceremony itself was scheduled for 3 p.m., an hour later than originally planned. As guests filed from the fellowship hall into the main sanctuary, I took a moment to survey our handiwork. The space had been transformed from a utilitarian church hall into something warm and inviting. Mason jars filled with wildflowers adorned every table, string lights cast a golden glow over the room, and the aroma of Sarah's cooking created an atmosphere of celebration rather than pretension. "It's beautiful," Charlotte said, appearing beside me again. She had touched up her makeup and fixed her hair, but more importantly, she looked peaceful for the first time all day. "It's exactly what I didn't know I wanted." "Are you ready?" I asked. "Almost," she said, then turned to face me fully. "Rebecca, I need to say something before we go in there. I need to apologize properly. Not just for the wedding planning, but for everything. For taking you for granted, for being ashamed of where I came from, for forgetting that you're the reason I had any opportunities at all." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I spent so much time trying to fit into the Thornfield world that I forgot the world you created for me was already perfect. You gave me love, support, education, and opportunities. You sacrificed your own dreams so I could pursue mine, and instead of honoring that, I tried to erase it. Charlotte." "No, let me finish," she said, taking my hands in hers. "I want everyone in that church to know who you are and what you mean to me. I want them to know that I'm only standing here today because my sister raised me with love and determination and incredible sacrifice. I want them to know that Rebecca Mitchell is the most important person in my life, and that I'm proud to be her sister." The words I'd been longing to hear for months finally came, and they were everything I'd hoped for and more. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Because once you say that in front of all those people, there's no taking it back. Patricia's social circle will know exactly who you are and where you came from." "Good," Charlotte said firmly. "Let them know. I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not." The ceremony was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Father Rodriguez, who had been informed of the morning's drama, began by addressing the congregation directly. "Before we begin today's ceremony," he announced, his voice carrying easily through the packed sanctuary, "I want to acknowledge someone very special, the person who made this wedding possible through their generosity and love, and who exemplifies the true meaning of family devotion." My heart began to race as I realized what was happening. "Rebecca Mitchell," Father Rodriguez continued, "would you please stand?" I felt every eye in the sanctuary turn toward me as I rose from my seat in the front pew, the place of honor Charlotte had insisted I occupy. Rebecca has been more than a sister to Charlotte. She has been a mother, a mentor, a provider, and a constant source of love and support. Today's celebration is possible because of her sacrifice and dedication. The congregation erupted in applause, and I saw several people wiping away tears. Patricia Thornfield was clapping enthusiastically, her earlier resistance completely forgotten. "And now," Father Rodriguez said with a smile, "let us celebrate the union of Charlotte Rose Mitchell and Marcus James Thornfield, surrounded by family and friends who understand that love, not status, not wealth, not social position, is what truly matters." As Charlotte walked down the aisle, radiant in her beautiful gown, she paused at my pew and took my hand. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered, "not just today, but every day for the past 22 years. Then she continued toward Marcus, who was waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes and a smile that could have lit up the entire church. The wedding ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and absolutely perfect. As Charlotte and Marcus exchanged vows they had written themselves, speaking of love, loyalty, and the importance of family, I felt a deep sense of completion. This was what I had always wanted for her, not just success or social acceptance, but genuine happiness built on authentic relationships. When Father Rodriguez pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. As Charlotte and Marcus kissed, I saw Patricia Thornfield dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, completely caught up in the emotion of the moment. The reception that followed was nothing like what had been originally planned, but it was infinitely better. Instead of formal dancing and stilted conversation, guests mingled freely, sharing stories and laughter over Sarah's delicious food. The atmosphere was warm and genuine, with none of the pretension that had characterized the pre-wedding events. Charlotte and Marcus's first dance was to acoustic guitar music provided by one of the church members, and as they swayed together in the soft light of the fellowship hall, I knew that this was how their marriage would be: real, authentic, and built on love, rather than appearances. As the evening wound down, Charlotte found me helping to clean up the kitchen. "Leave that," she said, taking the dish towel from my hands. "You've done enough for one day. For one lifetime, actually." "I'm happy to help," I said, but she shook her head. "No more helping for today. Today, you're just my sister, and I'm going to take care of you for once." She led me to a quiet corner of the fellowship hall, away from the remaining guests. "I have something for you," she said, pulling a small wrapped box from her purse. "I know it's not much, especially compared to everything you've given me, but I wanted you to have this." Inside the box was a simple gold locket, engraved with the words, "My sister, my hero." "It's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Open it," she urged. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of us as children, taken shortly after our parents' death, and one from her college graduation, both of us beaming with pride and joy. "I want you to remember," Charlotte said softly, "that no matter how far apart we drift, no matter what mistakes I make, you will always be the most important person in my life. You're my family, Rebecca, my real family, and I will never, ever forget that again." As I fastened the locket around my neck, I felt the last of my hurt and anger melting away. We had both learned something important that day, that real love isn't about control or obligation, but about respect, support, and the courage to be authentic with each other. The wedding I had saved wasn't the elaborate affair Charlotte had originally planned. It was something much better, a celebration of love, family, and the understanding that the most precious things in life can't be bought or staged. They have to be earned through years of dedication, sacrifice, and genuine care for others. As Charlotte and Marcus prepared to leave for their honeymoon, she hugged me one last time. "Thank you," she whispered in my ear, "for everything. For raising me, for loving me, for never giving up on me, and for showing me what really matters." "Thank you," I replied, "for remembering who we are to each other." And as I watched her drive away with her new husband, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete and utter peace. 6 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. Charlotte's voice was bubbling with excitement as she delivered news that seemed too good to be true. "Rebecca, you're never going to believe this," she said, barely containing her enthusiasm. "Do you remember Patricia's friend, Margaret Whitmore? The one who runs the charity foundation?" I vaguely recalled meeting an elegant older woman at the wedding reception, who had spent considerable time asking about my work coordinating the emergency vendors. The one with the silver hair and the kind eyes? That's her. She called me yesterday with the most incredible proposition. She wants to offer you a job as the Director of Community Outreach for the Whitmore Foundation. Rebecca, it's a 6-figure salary, full benefits, and you'd be coordinating charitable events and fundraising initiatives throughout the Chicago area. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, stunned. She wants to offer me a job, but she barely knows me. She knows enough, Charlotte said firmly. She told me she was more impressed by what you accomplished in 2 hours at the wedding than by anything she'd seen from professional event planners with decades of experience. She said you had a natural talent for bringing people together and making magic happen with limited resources. The opportunity was overwhelming. After years of working at Morrison & Associates in Millbrook, the idea of a completely new career in Chicago seemed both thrilling and terrifying. There's more, Charlotte continued. Marcus and I have been looking at houses in Oak Park, the suburb where we had the wedding. There's a beautiful Victorian cottage for sale, just 3 blocks from where we're planning to buy. We thought, we hoped maybe you'd consider moving closer to us. Moving to Chicago. Leaving Millbrook, the only home I'd ever known. Starting over at 36 years old. The magnitude of the decision was staggering. I know it's a lot to think about, Charlotte said quickly, sensing my hesitation. But Rebecca, I've spent the last 6 months realizing how much I missed having you in my daily life. I want to be close to you again. I want to be the sister I should have been all along. What about your life with Marcus? Your new marriage? I don't want to complicate things. You wouldn't be complicating anything, Charlotte said emphatically. Marcus adores you. He keeps saying that meeting you was one of the best parts of marrying me. And Patricia? Well, Patricia has become one of your biggest advocates. She tells everyone about how you saved our wedding and showed her what real class looks like. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in the doorway of the Victorian cottage in Oak Park, holding a set of keys and marveling at how dramatically my life had changed. The house was perfect. 2 bedrooms, a sunny kitchen, and a small studio space where I could continue painting. More importantly, it was only a 10-minute drive from Charlotte and Marcus's new home. The Whitmore Foundation proved to be everything Charlotte had described and more. Margaret Whitmore was a remarkable woman who had built a charitable empire focused on education and family services. She had indeed been impressed by my impromptu wedding coordination, but more than that, she was intrigued by my background. You understand what it means to sacrifice for family, she told me during my first week on the job. You understand the difference between genuine need and manufactured drama. Those qualities are rare in this business. My first major project was coordinating a fundraising gala for children's literacy programs. Using the same network of small vendors and authentic approach that had saved Charlotte's wedding, I created an event that raised twice the expected amount while costing half the anticipated budget. The success established my reputation in Chicago's charitable community and opened doors I'd never imagined. But the most profound change in my life wasn't professional. It was personal. For the first time in 22 years, I had a relationship with Charlotte that was balanced and reciprocal. She would call just to chat, not because she needed something. She would invite me to dinner parties where I was introduced as her beloved sister, not her former guardian. She would ask my opinion on decisions and genuinely listen to my advice. I'm learning to be a sister instead of a dependent, she told me one evening as we sat on her back porch, watching Marcus grill burgers for a casual dinner. It's harder than I expected, but so much better. The healing process wasn't without challenges. There were moments when old patterns would resurface, times when Charlotte would unconsciously expect me to solve her problems, or when I would automatically jump in to fix things before she asked. But we had both learned to recognize these moments and address them directly. I'm perfectly capable of handling my own conflict with the wedding photographer, Charlotte said one day when I started to intervene in a dispute over their album delivery. But thank you for offering to help. It was a small moment, but it represented a seismic shift in our dynamic. Charlotte was learning to stand on her own, and I was learning to let her. The relationship with the Thornfield family also evolved in unexpected ways. Patricia, who had once viewed me as an embarrassment, became one of my strongest allies. She referred wealthy donors to the foundation and even volunteered for several of our events. "I learned something important from your wedding," she told me during one of our planning meetings. "I learned that authenticity is more valuable than perfection. That lesson has changed how I approach everything in my life." Gregory Thornfield, Marcus's father, proved to be equally supportive. He introduced me to business leaders who became major foundation donors, and even offered to provide financial backing if I ever wanted to start my own nonprofit organization. "You have a gift for bringing out the best in people," he observed after watching me coordinate a successful charity auction. "That's a rare talent, and it should be cultivated." The most rewarding aspect of my new life was watching Charlotte and Marcus build their marriage on the foundation of authenticity we had established at their wedding. They chose to live modestly, prioritizing experiences over possessions, relationships over status. Their home became a gathering place for friends and family, filled with the kind of genuine warmth that no amount of money could buy. When Charlotte announced her pregnancy 18 months after the wedding, I was the first person she called. "Rebecca, I'm pregnant," she said, her voice filled with joy and wonder. "I'm going to be a mother, and I'm terrified and thrilled, and so grateful that my child will have you as an aunt. I'm going to spoil this baby rotten," I promised, already mentally planning nursery decorations and toy shopping expeditions. "I hope you will," Charlotte laughed. "But more than that, I hope you'll teach them what you taught me. That real love means showing up, making sacrifices, and never giving up on the people who matter most." As I hung up the phone, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of being excluded from Charlotte's wedding had ultimately led to the most important lesson of our lives, that relationships built on authenticity and mutual respect are infinitely more valuable than those built on obligation or social expectation. The wedding that had nearly destroyed our relationship had instead transformed it into something stronger and more beautiful than either of us had imagined possible. Charlotte had learned to value substance over style, and I had learned to value myself enough to demand the respect I deserved. 3 years later, as I held my newborn niece, Emma Rose Thornfield, I marveled at how perfectly everything had worked out. Charlotte had become the sister I'd always hoped she would be, and I had found a life that was fulfilling in ways I'd never expected. "Thank you," Charlotte whispered as she watched me cradle her daughter. "For everything. For raising me, for saving my wedding, for teaching me what really matters, and for never giving up on us." "Thank you," I replied, gazing down at the beautiful baby in my arms, "for remembering that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice, love, and the willingness to fight for each other." The crisis that had once threatened to destroy us had instead become the foundation for a new kind of relationship, one built on equality, respect, and the understanding that the most precious things in life are earned through love, sacrifice, and the courage to be authentic with the people who matter most. As I looked around Charlotte's living room, filled with photographs from that chaotic but perfect wedding day, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most painful chapters. Our story, mine and Charlotte's, had always been about love, but it had taken a crisis to teach us that real love requires not just giving, but also receiving, not just sacrifice, but also recognition, not just loyalty, but also respect. The woman who had once been banned from her sister's wedding had become the architect of a new kind of family, one where love was expressed not through financial support or social climbing, but through presence, authenticity, and the daily choice to value each other exactly as we were. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.